Welcome to another episode of 68 Cups of Blueberry Tea, where we steep ourselves in the rich flavours of resilience, creativity, and the human spirit. Today, I am serving a blend that is as rare as it is robust. My guest is Paul Hogan, not the Crocodile Dundee actor, but the real-life Australian who has donned many hats. A former diplomat, a professional butler, and a television personality. From managing embassies to mentoring gentlemen on national TV, Paul's journey is a testament to the art of reinvention. So, brew your favourite cup, settle in, and let's sip on the extraordinary tales of Paul with humour and wisdom. Paul, thank you for having me here today. It's wonderful to be with you. To start us right off, because we have a lot to get through, you have lived in so many places. Do you ever feel like you've ever truly settled, or are you a citizen of the world?
I have lived in a lot of places. I've lived in about 6 countries. I left Australia basically when I was 24. When I came back when I was 55, there were obviously visits in between hand, and I think I spent a year or two. In my career, I spent about 8 months working in the department during the 26 years I was with them. And so you do become a citizen of the world. But I came back to Australia in 2015. We've been back for nearly 10 years and thoroughly enjoying it. It's nice to be home. Mm-hmm. Finally.
Oh, it's great to have you here in Australia.
The world's a small place and my kids are living all over the world, but I'm glad to be back here. Yeah.
Good. Was there a moment early in your life when you realised that you were destined for a more unusual path?
No, not really. I suppose it goes back to how I got into foreign affairs. And my father was transferred back in 1968 up from Melbourne with the public service, and we had nothing else to do in Canberra in those days but join the public service. So I did, and before I went, the night before I went to the public service board, my father drove me around Canberra and explained what all the various ministries were and what the buildings were. And we came across foreign external affairs it was at that stage, and my father said to me, he said, that's Department of External Affairs. I said, what do they do? He said, oh, they run embassies overseas. I said, oh, really? He said, yeah, the people there, they go overseas, the diplomats. I said, oh, fair enough. So the next morning I went down to the Public Service Board, and the fellow said, where would you like to go? And I said, External Affairs. And he said, yeah, we've got a vacancy there. And that's how it all started.
So you spent 26 years in the Australian Diplomatic Service. What's the weirdest or most unexpectedly moving thing that happened in that time?
Well, a lot of my work was consular work, and the other side of it was administration. So administration is administration. You can have some fun times, but it's administration. But the consular work is where it's all death and disaster. And I've attended everything. In Los Angeles, when I was there, we were doing about 110 deaths a year. But a lot of them were people on the planes and that sort of thing. But you get involved in suicides, in child murder, and you also get young people get thrown into jail for drug offences and stupidity. You get young people killed overseas on holiday. So you get involved in that sort of thing. It's it leaves a mark on you, but no different, I'm sure, to what policemen and AMBOs and people like that in Australia have. But there was a reason that in our first training session I went on for consular work that we had to sit through an autopsy, and that makes you realise what it's all about.
Mm-hmm. So then what did such experiences teach you about human nature that does still stick with you today?
my attitude to life is basically, or attitude to other people, is that I just sit back and listen, and I don't jump to conclusions. I wait for them to speak and listen to what they're talking about. I hope that's what I do anyway. But I believe I've got a good empathy. It did show me empathy, and it gives you an understanding of the world that a lot of people don't see, because you are dealing with a lot of heartache, and you've got you're at the other end of the phone when people call you and their daughter or son has just died on a working holiday trip overseas, and I read about them in the paper today, and it's I can relate to them, and you're also it gives you an empathy. It gives you an empathy for people, and I think that's the big one. It does. It gives you an empathy.
Yeah. Well, even in addition to the empathy for Australians who have suffered from losing someone overseas, it's also having an understanding of the cultures of the places that you've worked in. So what sort of experiences did you have where understanding the local culture was pivotal to your success in those locations?
Yeah. Canada was easy. Canadians and ourselves are very similar, and unlike what a lot of people think, Americans and ourselves are very different. Very different. We can get onto that later. But and I, being now an American as well as an Australian, I can tell you there's big differences. The Yugoslavia was interesting because the Yugs are great people. The Serbians, you get it. It was just a wonderful, wonderful cultural experience to, if I can use the expression, live amongst the wogs. And when I was in Argentina, a colleague of mine, we went to lunch, and we were coming back looking through a department store. And this young girl came up to us and said, "Are you Australian?" And we said, "Yes, we are." She said, "What are you doing over here?" We said, "Oh, we're with the Australian Embassy." She said, "Oh." So I said to her, "What, you've been to Australia?" She said, "Oh, we've just come back after 7 years." I said, "How did you like it?" And she looked at us both and just said, "I suppose you're the wogs over here, aren't you?" So, you've got to get to know the cultures where you're living, and that was a wonderful thing about spending 2 years in Yugoslavia. The Yugoslavs are great people, and then I went to Jamaica, and I remember being on the plane going down from Miami to Jamaica, and I was the only white person there. And this little fella, he must have been about 50, grey hair. He had the curly hair, and his little black Jamaican came up to me and said, "What's wrong with you, boy? You look as though you've never seen a black man." And I thought to myself, my God, it's showing, And I'm so glad I did that posting, and I extended there, and most people didn't want to go there. I thought it was just a great, wonderful place to go to, and I wasn't disappointed, and I extended for a year. And it was nice being on the other side of the fence of being, the 2% of the population, and you stood out. And it really gave you an understanding how other people stand out. And, we've all got our cultures, and we can mix together and we can blend together. And I think that's important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, during such tenures, were there any particular events or interactions that profoundly impacted your perspective on international relations?
International relations are an interesting thing. They really are. It's, the Donald Trump, I think, is a perfect example of how difficult international relations are, because you can't trust anybody these days. So I'm a bit of a cynic as far as that goes. It's I've seen it at the top end, and you see what's supposed to be going on, and then you see what happens a few years later, and that sort of thing. So. International relations, it's politics. It's basically what it is. And so, it's I sort of stand back and just say, what's going to happen next? When's the next boot going to drop? Basically,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, such things as boots dropping, diplomatic roles do come with unique challenges. What was one of the most unexpected hurdles you faced, and how did you overcome it?
I don't know whether there was any real difficult hurdles to face. There were situations that I was confronted with, mainly on the administrative side, balancing budgets when you're working in an environment of, rapid inflation where your currency goes from 14 to the dollar to 10,000 to the dollar in 12 months. It's pretty hard to budget that sort of thing because people have got the impression that, if the currency is devaluating, then it gets cheaper for you, but it doesn't because inflation keeps it up there and they're still level pegging. And, Argentina was a good example of that, where you've got, it used to cost me, because the euro went from 14 to, or the Australia went from 14 to 10,000. And then Menem came in, that was a Sunday. He came in on the Sunday and they brought in a new economic plan on the Monday. And on the Friday night before that, I got a taxi home from the office about 9 miles. It cost me 75 cents. I got a taxi into the office on the Monday morning. It cost me $23. So, there's those sort of challenges from an administrative point of view. I don't need to go into challenges as far as consular work goes, but in an administrative point of view. So you're always on your toes and you can come up with, and I did on a couple of occasions in relation to the cost of our communications and the running of our impressed accounts, which we don't have anymore. I come up with ideas that were able to save the government an awful lot of money and streamline our services. Yeah. So that's the sort of thing, sort of putting our system against the local system, and just because they do it a different way doesn't mean they're wrong.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, for anyone looking to enter into a diplomatic career, what advice would you have for them?
I think point one is that going to live overseas is not the easiest job in the world. You've got to be very open to change. If you've got a partner, your partner has to be very open for change too, because I've seen couples come overseas thinking, well, isn't this great? And it can end in disaster. And it has done on a number of occasions. I won't go into that now, but it has done on a number of occasions. Not many, but it does. And a lot of postings are called short because people can't stand the climate, or they just don't realise what it's like to live in a foreign country. They miss home too much. So first of all, you've got to be acceptance of living in another culture, and acceptance of people. You've got to be open to everything, as your partner has to be. And I think that's number one point, that you've got to be fit for service. And if you can do that, you're going to have a great career. It's wonderful. It's a different lifestyle, totally different lifestyle that you could ever hope for, and you get to know the world.
Mm-hmm. Very exciting. And then transitioning to hospitality. So from a consul to a butler and television personality, what inspired you to transition into the world of hospitality and service?
Well, that's an interesting one. Due to family circumstances, I left the Foreign Service in mid-90s. Due to I had young children, and I'm married an American, and that didn't go too well. So I ended up in America. I had two very young children, and I realised that I couldn't sort of pursue my career and sort of be a part-time dad. So I moved to the States, and we had a bed and breakfast there. We got into together. I got the sack from that after about 2 years, and so I had to find something else to do, and I fiddled around for a while, and I came across an article about Rupert Murdoch's butler, and I read it, and I thought to myself, most of that stuff I've been doing as a diplomat running embassies. It's more of a state manager than anything else. So I wrote up a resume and I sent it to a couple of agencies in the UK, in the USA, got no response. And I sent one to an agency in London. The next thing I know, I was interviewed by a fellow in Texas who was into natural gas, quite a wealthy fella. And he interviewed me twice and then said, okay, I like the way you operate, but I need you to do some cooking. Would you go to cooking school for 6 months? So I said, sure. So I ended up going to the New England Culinary Institute and learnt to cook, which was a wonderful thing to do, absolutely. And that's when I came back and I got into estate management, hospitality, and basically for him I used to do a lot of cooking. I don't do much of it now, but basically just running the estate, and it covers things like security, protocol. Because of entertainment, we've had in the current job, we've had prime ministers and ministers through here, heads of big organisations, international visitors. There's also security, as I said. There's the renovations that have to be done. There's the communications. There's all that sort of stuff that you're doing in running an embassy that I'm doing here. I've got staff management. I've got about 10 staff working for me. And that's the sort of, you've got to think of all those things as far as... and you've got to keep the boss on track as well. It's we were in Bellevue Hill, and he decided he wanted to put on a fireworks display, and I had to say to him, no, you can't do that because you don't want to send... It was in the middle of summer. You don't want to put Bellevue Hill on fire. And that was a bit of an argument, but I won that one. Thank God. Yeah, fireworks don't work that well.
Fireworks don't work how so well?
In Australia in the summer. But it's just that there's with what I was doing in the Foreign Service, many of those skills were transferable. And also the stuff that I know, just worldly stuff, it comes into play all the time because you're dealing with people that are travelling all the time and they're wealthy, and, you're able to... They've got a problem, you can fix it. And that's the name of the game and I think that's what I learned from being an SAO and in Foreign Service. It was always said, if somebody had a problem, they used to say, ask Hogs, because he's got a mate that can fix that. I had a mate that could fix everything, and that was the name of the game.
You would know a guy?
I'd know a guy, yeah. Still do.
You still do. So would that be what is a bit of a misconception about when you think about the butler, it's more than what people may think?
Oh, yes, totally. Sure, I can dress up in my butler's outfit, and I've done that on many occasions, and I can serve table and I can lay table and I can put on dinners for 500 people, and I've done that as well. And, that takes an awful lot of planning, etc. Now, I must admit, when I came back to Australia, the first place I got a job at was the Commonwealth Club in Canberra. And I was a duty manager there, and we had 9 different functions rooms. And you'd have 6 or 8 functions running at the same time. And I had used to control the whole lot of them. And you'd be putting on dinners for 300 people. And I control that too. So I learnt how to run a function. And that's very important. You've got to understand how to run a function. And it's quite a skill, actually. And I learned how to do that. And I've been able to do that here now. And this boss says, and I have had the request at 5 o'clock in the evening that we've got 30 people coming for dinner tonight. Can you please fix it? Now, I've done that thanks to local restaurants, etc. But we've been able to do it because we're able to put the tables down. We've got the facilities here to do it. And I bought this stuff without any approval. I just went out and got it because the first time we did it, I said, we need to do this, because this will happen again and again, and it does.
So how do you run a function? How do you keep an eye on 8 or 9 different functions going on at the same time? With
a great deal of focus. You've got to have very good staff. And when I was working at the Commonwealth Club, there's a long corridors, etc. And the thing on your phone would say, if it was a slow night, I'd do 9,000 steps a night, right? If it was a normal night, you'd be doing 18,000, and on a busy night, you'd be doing 25,000. So you'd walk around the place all the time, just keeping an eye on what's going on and making sure you know the programs and when they're happening, etc. And it's just basically logistics and keeping the whole thing running.
Mm-hmm. And that's investing in your staff as well?
Absolutely. I'm a great believer in giving people ownership of their jobs and delegating. Mm-hmm. A friend sent it me once. He came and visited me down in Jamaica when I was there, and something came up. He's sitting in my office, a colleague. And he watched me for a while, and he said, Hogs. I said, what? He said, why have a dog and bark yourself? And it's something that I hadn't thought of until then, and it's something that's always been at the back of my mind. Why have a dog and bark yourself? So if you've got competent people there, let go. Encourage them to take ownership of their job, and they do. and you can sit back. And basically the only time you have to step in, you monitor them, but you don't let them fail. And and if something does go wrong, you fix it. And you don't have to do an inquiry into it. What you do is you fix it, you smile at them, you laugh, and then you go on, because they're not going to do it again. Nobody makes a mistake deliberately. So you encourage them, and they're not afraid of making a mistake then. And if they make the same mistake 3 times, then you've got a problem. Or twice even, but normally they don't. And, they don't have to feel bad about it. It's a learning process, and that's the name of the game.
I like that. Well, then, what is a timeless principle of etiquette that you believe everyone should embrace in such situations? So it's the etiquette of letting the mistake happen and laughing about it and being friendly about it, and it won't happen again. What are some other principles of etiquette that we could embrace?
Well, that's just good people management. Basically, it's good people management. Make people feel valued and worthwhile. Etiquette. Is etiquette the right word that you want to use there?
Maybe not. I guess, yeah, you're right. People management.
People management, yeah. Just being kind to people. It's. I remember I got a job a number of years ago running a T-shirt factory in Malone, New York, where I was living, and I had about 500 employees there. And I remember the fellow who used to run the deck, we used to have probably about 40 lorries coming in every day. It was very busy with, I won't explain it, but cotton coming in and product going out. But we're very busy. And the fellow who ran the loading bay came to me one day and said, "We've got such and such a problem." I said, "Yeah. So what are you going to do about it?" He said, "That's not my job. You're the manager." I said, "Mate, I don't even know how to make a T-shirt. I'm here to run the place. I want to play golf." He looked at me and he said, I said, what are you going to do about it? He said, "I don't know." I said, "Well, if you were me, what would you do about it?" And he said, "I do such and such." I said, "Great idea, go and do it." And he did it. And that fellow used to walk around the factory with his hunchback, shoulders over like this all the time, and his staff treated him with contempt. Anyway, I started working with this fellow, and over a period of time, he stopped walking hunchback. He started walking upright. And he'd come into me and he'd say, "Paul," he said, "such and such happened today and I did X." I said, "Good, terrific." He kept me informed. Then he said to me, he said, "You're going up for a conference in Montreal where the head office was this week." He said, "You might want to raise this." And all of a sudden, his staff started respecting him. He was walking upright because he knew he had the confidence of the boss. And it was so important. And he came to me one day and said, "Montreal have sent down all these customs clearances. There are about 10 of them. They want me to sign them." I said, "No, you're not signing them." I said, "No way in the world." He said, "Why not?" I said, "Because you are the one that's signing these things. We don't know what they're doing." Anyway, so he refused to sign them. So I go up to Montreal the next week, and the old boss in charge of it, Benny Tish was his name. He was an Israeli fellow who was in Canada. He said, "What's wrong with you? Don't you trust us?" I said, "What do you mean, Benny?" He said, "This thing about the customs, don't you trust us?" I said, "Benny," I said, "Tell you what, why don't you go and get the checkbook and you sign 10 checks for me, blank ones, and I'll sign 10 customs forms for you." He said, "You're being ridiculous." I said, "Am I?" Sure enough, I lost the job. Lost the job about 3 months later. And anyway, these things happen.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so I guess then moving on from being a butler / real estate manager or running a T-shirt factory, how does one land a role on a primetime reality show?
That was interesting. I'd taken a job down in the Bahamas, to run a property down there. And I thought, oh, this is the ideal job. But you've got to be careful when you get into this personal staff situation that when you interview, they're not interviewing you, you're interviewing them as well. And you've got to be careful that you are taking the right job because it's a pretty close relationship. And the one in the Bahamas didn't work out. And I just sort of rang them up one day and said, look, I've had enough of this, I'm out of here, full stop, because they were ridiculous. And I got back and the agency I worked for, or the agency I was registered with, called me up and said, they've got a reality TV show in France and they want a butler. It's just, there's no speaking parts. There'll be odd sort of on-camera stuff. But he said, it pays a month shooting, would pay you $10,000 US. I said, yeah, I'll take that. So anyway, cut a long story short, I said, day before I left, I said, well, what do you want me to wear? And they said, have you got a lounge suit? I said, yes. I said, would you like me to wear a butler's outfit? They said, have you got one? I said, I can get one. So they said, yes. And so we're all there and we arrive. And I remember we're staying at a motel, Novotel, I think it was, in France. And the morning of the first day of the shoot, I came down dressed as the butler. And these are all Americans. And I walked in there and the whole room went quiet. Just the outfit just sort of threw them. Anyway, it sort of started off from there. And it was interesting. And I found with it was that I didn't understand about reality TV is they don't give a damn about the people. And I took the directors and the producers aside when I said, you can't treat people like this. And they started getting nervous. Said, you can't treat people like this because it's not the way you treat people, because they want to bring out the emotions in you, and it's a wrong way of doing it because they're just upsetting people basically. And they had a psychologist on staff to protect them, not to protect the people. Right? Anyway, I slowly learnt that this is the way you make reality TV set. You set people up to fail, basically. And the people on the show were the young women, basically, and they're from dubious backgrounds. They're lovely kids, but a lot of them come from sad backgrounds. And so I got into it, and about halfway through it, the directors came to me and said, look, we're not too happy with the presenter. Would you mind staying back later and we'll rerun you as the presenter, which is what happened. And to cut a long story short, the next thing I know, I'm the presenter of the program. What was interesting, however, just to get back on how they use people, there was this young girl, she had curly dark hair, I remember, she's a lovely kid, and they were interviewing her, she got rejected. And one of the interviewers, the producers, had sat down with her to do a segment with her as to why she was leaving. And when it came up on the screen, she broke down crying. And she said, well, and they said, well, because you didn't get selected, basically, Joe. And the fellow that did the segment with me said, I want you to know that her crying had nothing to do with the show. Her crying was, who are you going to miss most on this show? And she said, Paul. And she said, why? He said, because he looked after us. And then she broke down crying. So that's the way that they manipulate the whole thing. Uh-huh. And I've seen situations where they'll take something that happened on day one and they'll stick it in day 5. That sort of thing they do. It's just playing with people's minds.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and so this was for Joe Millionaire.
Yeah.
And can you talk to us about the premise of this particular TV show?
Oh, Joe Millionaire was just the fact that he's got a current one on the TV at the moment where these 50-year-old birds are going out with a 63-year-old man. It's the Golden Bachelor or some damn thing. It's ridiculous. But basically you take 23 young women to France and you start knocking them off one after another and saying, we don't want you, and they sort of put situations in front of them. And then they really finally picks the right girl. He's not a millionaire that he's supposed to be. He's a builder's labourer, which he was. And so that's what it's all about, And I even got my own Muppet show out of that. Joe 100 guy, you can see it. So not many people got their own Muppet, but I got mine.
And how long did it go for?
We did 2 seasons.
Yeah.
We did 2 seasons, and at the end of the first season, they were hoping that it would garner about 14 million people an episode. Our final episode had over 45 million people watching it. It was the most successful reality TV show ever. And, I'd be getting on planes and having people thrusting telephones at me, please talk to my wife. And you walk through airports and people would be going gaga and a whole lot. And the favourite one was I used to stay with a mate of mine who was the consul in New York, and I used to stay with him when he was going through New York. And we go down to bars at night, and all of a sudden there'd be a line of about 20 young women there, all wanting the butler's a selfie or an autograph from the butler. And invariably they'd all look at me and say, my mum just loves you.
What a guy always loves to hear.
But the classic was that I did a show. I did an advertisement for the. I lived in my base was in the Adirondacks in New York State, up in northern part of the Adirondacks, and the bloke who was in charge of tourism, a friend of mine, he said, Paul, would you come to New York and do an advertisement for us as the butler from Joe Millionaire? Because I used to sit in a chair with my butler's outfit and a glass of cognac and tell them what's happening in the show. They said, would you come and do this for us so we can do an ad for the Adirondacks? I said, sure. And invariably we went down there. And the same thing happened after we'd shot the ad. We go out that night and there's this whole string of young women all wanting their photograph and take them with the butler. Anyway, I found out about 6 months later that my ex-wife, who was renowned for taking me to court, was down in Lake Placid, and a friend of hers said, oh, look, I want to introduce this fellow, and he's a lawyer here. And she said to him, she said, oh, I'm always on the lookout for a good lawyer. And he, knowing who she was, because her name was all over everything in the legal department in the Adirondacks, said, look, I'm sorry, I can't take your case. And she said, why not? He said, well, that would be a conflict of interest. And she said, how so? He said, well, you see, Neil, fella from tourism, he told me about the trip that he went to in New York with your husband and how they went to the bar afterwards and how all these young ladies lined up. And he said, I want to go on the next trip.
That was that.
That was that.
Well, and that was that for Joe Millionaire. And then there was also the TV show Groomed, which you were also host for.
Yeah, that was another one. It was used to take frogs and turn them into princes for, it was Canadian TV. And we used to take frogs and turn them into princes. And that was an interesting undertaking. And one of the things we did a show one day with a Mexican fellow who was marrying a Canadian girl. And what I couldn't get over, having lived in the States at this stage for around about 12 years continuously, was the respect that the Canadians had for the Mexican. Because in the States, it didn't exist. It was really so blatant to me that this racism is purely there in the United States, and you can see it every day on TV, but it wasn't in Canada. And it's one of the things that has upset me coming home. I used to think Australia was very, very multicultural, but I'm seeing threads of racism coming into Australia now, and that really upsets me because I'm sure it's a lot of the people who we're going up against immigrants and this type of stuff. And I think, well, when did you get here? My lot have been here since 1860. When did you get here? And, the world's a big place, and we're all, we are so better off I'm getting onto a wrong subject here, but I look at coming back to Australia after 10 years, and the fellow I broke my ankle last year, or 2 years ago now, and the surgeon I had, his name was Sanjeev Gupta. And he's darn Indian, but you close your eyes and he sounds just like you or me. He's an Aussie, and I see it with people like Penny Wong. I see it with my dentist, who's also Indian, who's excellent. These people are contributing to the country, and you see the young people coming around and they're Asian or they're Indian or they're whatever, or they're African, and they open their mouths and they sound just like you or me. Now, you couldn't ask for better. You couldn't ask for better. And now we've got these skinheads and idiots, bogans, who think, oh no, white guys are better. You've got to be written through MAGA. It's terrible. It's absolutely terrible. And we've got to stamp that out. Because one of the great things about Australia is that, the only true people are the Aboriginals who have been here for 65,000 years, and we need to give far more respect to them, and we need to sort of stamp out this nonsense that's going on at the moment.
Well, you mentioned that was one of the differences that you noticed between Canada and the States. Mm-hmm. So having lived in both Australia and the United States.
And Canada.
So what led you to transitioning from a butler and a television personality to a political candidate?
Oh, in the States. That was pretty easy. I was up at the golf. I'd taken out citizenship because my wife, to get her to the top of the queue to get her into America, I had to be an American citizen, even though I'd been married for 4 years. And 4 years. And the problem was that it would have taken about 9 years. If I took out citizenship, she comes in straight away. So I applied for citizenship so I could get her in. But also I'd been there for nearly 20 years. And I thought, well, I've spent a lot of my time here and I understand the system. I enjoy America. And we're at the golf club. Our property there joined the golf club. Great spot. And we walked over to the golf club this night. And the fellow who was he was a legislator in the county, right? And he was a Republican. I'm a diehard Democrat, of course. And I was on the Industrial Development IDA, Industrial Development Agency. Industrial Development Agency, which helped the county get industry and develop the economy. And I'd got a little bit of notoriety from that because the press used to come onto our meetings, etc., because I stood up for an issue. I can't remember what it was. Anyway, this individual came up to me in the golf club having dinner and started abusing me. And I just looked at him and got up and said, don't you dare talk to me like that. Don't you dare. And it got quite heated. And a mate of mine got up and separated us. I'm not violent, never hit anybody in my life. But, it got quite vocal. And he walked off in a huff. And I thought to myself, screw him. I want him out. So I applied for the job. I put myself up for election as the Democratic nominee for the position. And I went round, did all the right things, the whole lot. And lo and behold, about 3 weeks before the election, another fellow who I knew very well, who was a Democrat, he put his name forward. And so I'm running against Carl, who's a doctor, and a good mate of mine. And I didn't know he was going to do it, but he did. And somebody explained later, they said, look, you're a foreigner. You're in a small town. You're a foreigner. There is no way you could win. And that was all right. My object wasn't to win. My object was to get this bastard thrown off the committee, which I managed to do, and I was very happy about it. Carl won the seat, and we're fine.
What a wild ride.
It was.
Oh my God. So you achieved your purpose, even though you didn't win the seat?
I didn't get the seat, but I got that bastard off the committee.
Okay.
One of his mates said to me at the golf course one day, I was down in the backyard, and he said, hey, you're running against him. I said, yes. He said, why? I said, because I am. He was a Republican too, so I figured about it. Yeah.
And so have you had any other intentions to run in the political scheme?
Not really, no. It's if I was younger, I'd love to have a crack at Australian politics, but I'm too old for it now. It's, I see the Susan Lays and the bloody Barnaby Joyces and the, what's the bloke who won Goldstein recently, and I look at these clowns and I think to myself, who are they? And it's frightening, the quality of politicians we're getting today. And I think making up silly names for people is the way you convince people that this is what we should be doing.
Alrighty. Well, that is a very vast career that you have had. And I guess just a couple of things to close us off. So, what are some of the most valuable lessons you've learnt from your diverse career, and how have they shaped your personal philosophy? I think empathy was one in particular that you mentioned.
Yeah. I just believe tolerance for people. It's when I got this job, the fellow who got it, he moved. He got the job in January 2018, and I got a call about 2 months later because I was registered with an agency here, and I came and met him, and I came for an interview, and I got the job. And he said to the boss, he said, "This is the fellow that you need to get." And I think one of the reasons for it was the fact that we had 13 staff at that stage, including my position, working at the property. And there were 7 different nationalities, and I was the only Australian. And I think that my life overseas, or my life, has taught me to be tolerant of people's cultures and people. And you listen to them, and you see how they behave. And as I always said, just because they do it that way doesn't mean it's wrong. It's the way they do it, and you've got to tolerate that sort of thing. So that's why I took this job, and I've been in it now for coming up to 8 years, and we've still got about 5 or 6 different nationalities from Uganda to Nepal work in the property, and it's quite interesting. Yeah, and it's just given me a broad understanding of people.
Amazing. And to close us off, if someone were to play you in a movie, who should it be and why?
Oh, I think at the moment, if anyone was going to play me in a movie, it should be me.
No, you would have to be directing the movie.
Oh, no. I don't know who. I've never even thought of that. Yeah, that's one I'll have to put on notice. If they ever decide to make a movie about me, then I'll have to think about who you would get to play it, because I'm 1 in a million. It's too hard.
Question on notice it shall be.
My daughter wants me to write a book about my life, and I've got to do it. She even bought for Christmas, she gave me this thing to help you write a book, but I haven't got round to it yet. So, now for my birthday, I says, so I've got to get onto that. And, yeah.
I look forward to it.
Yeah, so will I.
Thank you so much, Paul.
Pleasure. Thanks, Gabrielle.
As we finish this cup of blueberry tea, we are left inspired by Paul Hogan's incredible journey thus far, a testament to the power of adaptability and the courage to embrace the various chapters of our lives. If Paul's story stirred something in you, don't keep it to yourself. Share this story with your friends and join me next time for more tales of resilience and transformation. Until then, keep steeping the stories that make life rich and full of flavour. Bye for now.